So one of the things that I got compliments from other people about that I've been around were, man, how have you been in this so long? How is your attitude so good? It's kind of funny. Last year at camp, I was telling something that I was not happy about and I was mad about. And somebody was like, I can't even see you getting mad. Right? And totally I have emotions that I deal with just like everyone. And I think I've kind of learned over the years that I was doing some things that were helping me internally process and externally enjoy life. And so I kind of have tried to figure out, hey, what am I doing well? What can I improve on? And how can I share some, things that are good with other people that you can actually put into practice? And so one of them is, how do you continue to run as a 40, 50, 60-year-old? That's something that's super important to me. And I think the key is you have to move your standards, right? And it's so crazy to think about moving your standards because it seems like you're inviting weakness into your life. And so example of that would be, hey, when I was 25, I was running 90 to 100 miles a week, running super fast, and I had a set of standards that I kind of lived by as an athlete. And some of those were, if I didn't run 6 miles, it did not count. Like that was my absolute minimum I was gonna run. And then 60 miles a week was baseline. Like if I'm not at 60, I'm not really training. And then a long run for me at that age was over an hour 40. Like those were just some standards that I didn't think about creating, but I just kind of intrinsically created them because I understood the demand of what I was trying to accomplish, and the standard that was necessary had to be those things. Well, if I use those same standards at 43, married with kids, working a ton, the stress level that I've already put on my body after almost 30 years of running consistently, I would get hurt. And one of the athletes that I kind of picked up a hint of this from was Meb Keflezighi, because I asked him one time, I was like, hey, how was that race for you? And he said, oh, it was a PR. And so I'm like super fan of this Olympic athlete, and I knew that was not his PR. And I was like, why did he just lie to me about his PR? Because that was not, so it was in, where was it? It was somewhere in California, and it was one of the rock and roll half marathons, and he ran like 104. And he had run like 101 or 102. And I was like, dude, that's not your PR. And I asked him, I was like, why'd you say that was your PR? He was like, well, every year I reset my PRs. And it was like, this is a PR for this year. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. Because he's playing a mental game with himself to encourage himself, right? Because we've all been there where we're like, well, I'm not as fast as I was when I was fill in the blank. Or maybe some of you guys still have that upside, but you'll get there eventually where you're like tipping over the top. And so resetting those standards. So standards now for me, golly, they're actually pretty low. Like 15 to 20 minutes I'm cool with for some days for a run. I try to run somewhere between 30 and 55 miles a week regularly. That's a standard. And I count a long run as somewhere around 80 to 90 minutes. And so I think that's something that is not weakness if it allows you to stay in the sport from a longevity standpoint. And so that's kind of my first tip, is if you do need to reset your standards, it's okay. Reset them and be okay with them. And then there also may be a period, even if you're somebody that has PRs still coming, that you're injured for a period and you need to reset your standard and be okay with what you're doing. So I think the important thing is look at the demand of what you're trying to accomplish and decide whether that standard is consistent with the demand. And then if it's not, you either have to change the demand or you have to change the standard. And I think either of those is fine, but they do have to line up, generally speaking. So if I stood up here and said, hey, in 4 years, I'm going to try to make the Olympic trials in the 10K. And you guys were like asking me questions about my training. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to run 30 miles a week. And, I might get in 4 or 5, workouts a month. Then you'd be like, okay, he's delirious. That's not matching the standard. So I think those two things need to match. So I want to move to another kind of tip or trick. So I was actually talking about this, we were talking about this morning with racing. And this is also adjusting standards in a way to encourage yourself. So who has raced and been too amped up for the race and it caused tightness and your body's almost inoperable, right? And you hurt, but you don't even know why, because you shouldn't be, because you're in great shape, but you go into it at such a high level of anxiety. Some people race well there. I've met some people that race really well there. And I actually coached twins. This was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Jared and Josh Carson, some of you guys know Jared and Josh. So Jared and Josh, very similar abilities. They're twins, identical twins, right? So a great research project to do stuff with identical twins. So the first time I coached them, they were in good shape, first race of the cross-country season, pulled them aside and said, hey guys, here's what we're going to do. I want you to go out towards the front, but fairly relaxed, and just hang tight. Just wait, and then 800 meters to go, I want you to make a hard move. So they run the race. Jared wins the race. Josh is 20 seconds, 30 seconds behind him. And they're similar ability at this point. And I pulled him aside. I was like, hey, Josh, what happened? He's like, I did exactly what you told me to do. I executed the plan perfectly. And I thought about that, and I was like, so he heard something different than what I said. I think his state was too low. Jared's natural state was way too high. And so I brought him down, and then as the race progressed, he got higher. Josh's natural state was probably mid. I brought him way too low with that instruction. So fast forward a few weeks, and I was like, told Jared same thing, pulled Josh aside, and I was like, hey man, this is it. We need to really see what you can do today. I want you to go out hard, connect to the front, stay there, and then I want you to go for the win with 800 meters to go. They finished 1 second apart. And so, that was a while back, but that started kind of this mental journey for me of thinking through how can you manipulate your states. And recently I got to talk to a dog trainer of a lady that had a therapy dog. And we were talking about this yesterday. She said that therapy dogs, what they're trained to do is they survey the breathing of everyone in the room. And they find people whose breathing is either characterized by a really short in-breath and a longer out-breath. And that's usually characterized as a low state. You've kind of given up, you're kind of down and out. Probably a lot of you are in that state right now when you're tired. You're a little bit low. And then there's this homeostatic state where you're equal breaths in, equal breaths out, which, Matt was kind of talking about, that good place to be. And then there's a hyperventilating state where you're fight or flight, and you're and so the dog will survey the room, and if you're in a low state, the dog will come over and pant next to you. And that affects your breathing state. It raises it to a little bit higher, and then the dog will slow down to equal breaths and you'll match it. And so I found that kind of fascinating because observing where you operate well when you race, I think is key to getting your body either to a little bit higher state or getting it back down to the homeostatic, and understanding and playing with that. And so how do you do that practically speaking? I don't have a ton of experience with it, but I know how I do it with myself. And so I'm going to share that, and hopefully kind of this will give you some insight of how to observe your own state and mentally and emotionally play with it. So I figured out for me that I'm a very excitable person. Like, I can get on board. If you're excited about something, I can join you very quickly. And that's true with a race. If I have an event coming up and I want to do well, I want to compete at the highest level, I want to use every ounce of energy I have, I can start that race so high and then get in that tense place and run really poor. That's easy for me to do. And so what I figured out is it's okay to have that excitement building up and to want to do good and to want to be the best. But as the race gets closer, I tend to de-escalate my expectations. So it's really funny. I've been on the race line before, and this is actually not meant to be a tactical mental trick against competitors. But someone will ask me how I hope to do, and I'll be, man, I'd be happy if I finished today. And that's me managing my state, right? Right before, I'm not telling you, this is my day, I'm going to win. I'm not saying that. I will reduce it. And one of the ways I learned that was just through happenstance, right? So I've got two examples where I did it on accident, and then I'll tell you one where I did it on purpose, because I learned. So one was my 1,500 meter PR. I was in such a low state of expectations, but a high adrenaline. Like, I was excited to be there, but I wasn't expecting to do well, because I showed up to the event track race. I literally got out of the car and they said, last call for 1,500. And so no warm up, jogged over, put my spikes on, checked in, number, I'm on the line. And I ran lights out amazing because I just wasn't thinking about it. I was like, well, no warm up. I guess today's not my day. Second example, the US 10K championships in Mobile, the fastest 10K I ever ran, I just didn't feel good the day before. And my wife was with me, and I was like, hey, I'm not going to run. Like, I'm not excited about the race. I don't feel good. My body's off. I'm going to delay this for another one. And she said, you know what? Why don't you just start? And if you don't feel good, no one cares. Like, you can just drop out. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll start. I ran the first mile in 4:32 and felt like so smooth, like super comfortable. Never started a 10K that fast before. Ended up running 29:43 and got 9th on the US 10K roads. So those were accidents. More recently, I did the US Masters Mile, and I had a foot injury. In 24 days, I ran 4 times. And I just did a couple little workouts. I cross-trained like crazy, made it to the start line, and the first 400 was 5th, in like 5th place. And I was like, 5th is good. I'd be happy with 5th. I'm content, right? It's like, hey, whatever scenario in, I'm going to be happy. I'm just going to enjoy it. 800 to go, I'm 3rd. I'm like, dude, I might get 3rd. This is even better than 5th. 400 to go, I'm 2nd and down a second and a half. 200 to go, I'm still second. And at that moment, I had this thought in my head. I was like, no one's going to beat me today. No one. And I end up winning by a second and a half. And it was just the process of allowing my emotional state to match the demand of the race. There's no need for me to be super high on my ability, myself, my place early on. And I just allowed it to build. And I think that's a skill that you guys can implement. I think it's a skill you can practice. And I think all too often what happens is we have super high adrenaline at the start and excitement, and it's very low at the end because you've used it all. I think if you can convince yourself it's not super important at the very beginning, you're not succumbing to poor performance. All you're doing is you're telling yourself how to manage your stress. Now, the opposite might be true if you're somebody that operates well on high stress, right? So you got to learn that for yourself. But that's my experience. And man, I wish I could go back to being 19, 18 with this knowledge, because I know I would have raced better. Because now as a coach implementing this, I've got a high school kid that was running like 427, and his workouts pointed to like 420, 419. I finally was able to convince him that nobody cared about his running. It was just him out there. He could just go have fun. And he ran a 7 or 8 second PR from 1 week to the next. So that's one of the tips. Moving on, a couple more I got for you guys, and then I've got some questions for you to ponder and talk amongst yourselves through the week. So locus of control. Yeah.
Just often, you mentioned kind of yourself as a case study on the high living person, but then and obviously your other athlete, that was the twin that's like a low living person, not low living, but
yeah. He's a mouth breather.
And so trying to get them up, besides just saying all right, this is your day, you got to go after it, are there any other strategies?
I think there are some people that operate off of, I don't think it's super healthy to do this, but if I think about Michael Jordan, and I think about some of these guys that will manufacture hate, I don't know, I think we run better off of joy and peace than we would. But I think there is some people that create these fake scenarios in their mind, and that motivates them. And they get into it with the crowd, or I think that's harder in running because it's so physiological and it's less brute force. I think you end up using all your energy. We're trying to conserve energy and spread it out over the race. But I think there are some people that do better off of like a fight or flight scenario. I just don't have a ton of experience with that.
Yeah, can I throw in a couple
Yeah.
things? Especially if you're in-person coach-athlete kind of relationship, and you can be at a race and somebody's in that low state and you need to bring them up a little bit. One of the things that I like to do is athletes will often mirror your body language, right? And teammates, this works at high school level, teammates and stuff too. And so if I see somebody that's hey, they're just too chill, they're too relaxed, I get hyped.
Yeah.
I'm jumping around, I'm getting in their face, I'm dancing, I'm trying to get, because they start to mirror some of that and get their teammates involved with that too. And then other positive things using music, right? Trying to get some pump up tunes going. And you can kind of manufacture some of the silliness or some of the, not that.
I bet you can't do this or that,
totally,
yeah.
Totally. Or I'll start to kind of be oh, yeah, bro from this school over here, he said he's going to smoke you today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just and oftentimes they know I'm just kind of making that stuff up, but it still gets people involved, it gets them a little hyped. So one mirroring, I think that some of the energy that you want to see in that athlete is big. And then just trying to use music, games, just some silly little mind games you can play with them as a good way to kind of get that energy level higher. Yeah.
I think such a great example. Do you remember the 200 that Jared did?
I was actually thinking about that. Yeah.
Running, so Jared on track. I think he'd already done a workout.
Yeah, he was finished.
Yeah, he's done with his workout, and Ryan's on the bike, and Ryan just starts going crazy.
Bananas.
And he
Yeah.
leaves him in on the bike, and he whips around, and I think he PR'd in the
Yeah. That was his 200
It was
PR.
so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the overall idea is there, like, explore where you're at, find, and it could change some from day to day, but generally speaking, I think there's a rhythm that you can get into for you. Couple more things. Locus of control, like, where do you feel like your surroundings control what you do, or are you in control? And I think there's a few things with locus of control that are important. One is positive self-talk. Man, we all should be practicing that all the time. Because think about how many negative thoughts come in your mind when you're running and you're battling, right? And the key there is not to beat yourself up about a negative thought, but to capture it and flip it as quickly as you can. And I've found the best way to do that for me is I speak out loud. Like, generally not super loud where it's like annoying, but I'll say things like, I feel good, I have more, or I'll focus on cadence or my breathing, or I'll find something to distract or change my mental state in the moment as quickly as possible. And if it comes again, you may have to do it 50 times. And if you run a marathon, it may be more than that. You may have to, this is just a bad spot. Okay, a good spot's coming. I'm looking for the good spot. So just generally practicing being a positive person. Yeah.
Like, I'm a person who has to overcome a lot of self-doubt, and I like this notion of doubting your doubt, where I think sometimes we feel like our doubts are true, and it's like sometimes if you really evaluate, you're like, I'm not even giving myself a chance, and I don't think my doubt is actually not true. So you can almost use that negativity against itself.
Fight negative. A negative and negative makes positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I just have two more, and then I want to throw some questions at you guys to think about, or you can comment on. So, more recently, one of the things that I've been jumping into is what to ignore and what not to ignore. I love that concept because as runners, we're actually training ourselves to ignore pain, to ignore the desire to stop. We ignore a ton. And we pay attention to certain things as well. We pay attention to the things that distract us and keep us positive. And so I think we have to ignore things we can't control. Like, we have to. We can't get overly obsessed with the weather or the wind or something that hampered your training early on that is affecting your performance later. You have to be in the moment and learn what to ignore and what not to ignore. And then more specifically, and this is like a running tip from the mental side, but it's also like a life tip. I heard this quote. There's a researcher that's done a lot with like child psychology and also depression. And one of her quotes is, she says, the worst hell you can live in is one where all you do is think about yourself. Like, that's like the worst place to be, where all you do is you're introspective and you overanalyze every single thing. And, like talking to you guys would be a great example of that. What if the fear that I had in talking to a group is, what if I say something wrong? Or what if it's not as articulate as someone else would? Or what if I say something stupid and people laugh at me, right? It's this overanalyzing of self that can cause someone to be depressed or overly negative. But the flip side of that is, who cares if I say something wrong? Who cares if I stumble over my words or, to have an awkward moment? I want to bring you guys something that's going to make you better. So do you see the focus shift there? Like, who cares about me? if I can say something that benefits you, man, that is valuable. Like, and that is what I think has just encouraged me in the last couple years to be even more positive and to enjoy life even more, is to think about what can I do to benefit everyone else around me. And we were Chad and I were talking about this yesterday. It's not to the extent where you ignore self, right? Like, I recharge alone. So part of my motivation to finish in 7 minutes is so that I can go have a few minutes by myself before the next thing, right? That's fine. Like, I understand that about me, and I want to do that. But at the same time, while I'm with other people, the focus doesn't need to be on me, and it's actually just making my life worse when it is. So I think we can practice that in running as well, when you're racing and viewing your competitors as someone you could help. Man, does it unlock your brain. And then when you have 150 meters to go, that's when you're just like, man, I'm going to absolutely kill this person. Like, they're not touching me. Like, I've got it. I'm on top now. And then your demand of the race matches the moment, right? And you can give that ultimate effort, and you can dig super deep and go for it. So here's my questions for you guys for this week. If you want to write them down or text them to yourself or make a note. What should you ignore? What should you ignore? Are there some things that you pay attention to that you would be better off ignoring in life, in racing, in work? I think because all these things relate. All these things tie in together. If work's better, training's going to be better. If training's better, racing's going to be better. If relationships are better, things just work better. So what should you ignore? What should you say to yourself when there is doubt or when you are racing? What should you say? And that's different than what do you say, because that word should takes you outside of yourself. And another way to phrase that would be, if you were Cody coaching your high school team and you saw someone struggling, what would you say to them? Like, so in other words, how would you treat someone else? Often we treat ourselves worse than we treat other people. Like, we're rougher on ourselves. We're more negative to ourselves. We attack quicker. So what should you say, or how would you treat others? And then the last one is just going back to the beginning. Should you de-escalate yourself before a race or a workout? Or do you need to escalate yourself before a race or workout? And you could try both. So what happens to me when I escalate myself is I go out way too hard. Like, way too hard. So I'm going to do a time trial with Jordan on Monday. And he asked me what I wanted to run. And I said like 4:40, 4:35 for the time trial. When I'm on the line, I will be telling myself, you know what? 4:50 is good today. Like, that's good enough. And that will calm me down. But then when I'm a quarter mile in, it's going to be, it's definitely 4:40 today. And then when I'm 800 in, it's going to be mid 4:30s. And then when it's 400 to go and I see that end, it's going to be everything I got, right? So it's just, or you could be someone who's too low, like that therapy dog, and you need to get up here to get back down to the middle, and then you go up again. So just to review on those questions, and then I'll be done. What should you ignore? What should you say to yourself, or how would you treat others? And should you de-escalate or escalate before races? All right, that's it. Any questions?